All right. Well, welcome back, Aydin, and wonderful to have you for the first time, Jason. We're going to talk quite a bit about AI, software, how that's impacting engineering. But to start, some quick backgrounds. Jason, you've done a ton and worked on some of the most popular products ever used by developers, whether Ubuntu and the operating system, whether we're talking about Heroku, obviously, CTO of GitHub. You were even a VC for a bit, and then you've now come back to build Poolside, which we'll talk a lot about. And Aydin, of course, founder, managing partner of Felicis, made some incredible investments from Canva to Shopify, Notion, Runway, and clearly Poolside, the next one, leading the Series A. So why don't we dive into the origin story? Like what got you to come back out and build a company again, and how did you guys all meet?
So origin story is pretty straightforward. As you went through my history, GitHub as a CTO, before that, same thing at Heroku, before that, same thing at Canonical. People make Ubuntu Linux, which is a long-winded way of saying that I'm useless in a desert island scenario, but thankfully the world values software. And in 2017, when I joined GitHub as a CTO, I had a singular ambition, is I wanted to turn GitHub from a code host into the world's first end-to-end software development platform fused by intelligence. And in the search for the intelligence layer at the time, this is pre-Transformers, I met ISO. ISO is my co-founder at Poolside and the CTO, and he had one of the world's first AI for source code, AI for software companies on the planet. And I tried to acquire that really quickly. And it didn't work out, but he and I bonded over the idea of neural networks, their applicability to software, and their kind of ramifications on the world at large. So fast forward, I just mentioned I was at Redpoint for a little while myself, and then we saw what was happening in the world, and we realized it's kind of endgame. And we can get into that later, but there's no world in which somebody who is going to be useless in a desert island scenario and seeing what happened here and seeing everything that ISO and I talked about in 2017 was going to sit this out.
Wonderful. And how did you connect?
Yeah, we had the good fortune of getting connected to Jason and ISO, I think right after their incubation, about, I'm going to say, a month or two later. And it was one of those really interesting moments. Everybody thinks, I think like the VC perspective is really interesting because I think Jason and ISO are these amazing operators. They're meant to do what they do. For me, it was like meeting them, hearing the scary vision, whereas just like Jason and ISO, maybe one or two people, nothing is done yet. There's like no data center, no GPUs acquired, crazy vision, insane amount of capital to raise, a lot of things to do. And I think it was one of the fastest. Yes, this is one of the crazy things about the venture business, is that sometimes you just gotta find a market that is so big that leaves you a lot of margin of error. And then you just need to find the right people. And I think one of the most under talked about or underestimated strengths is essentially like, this is all a positive outlier business. Everybody thinks, oh, you're like preventing risk. If that was the case, I don't think we would have done 90% of the investments we do. This is similar. You would all look at that like big risk, big risk, big risk, big risk. But then we saw like a mega market, something that is definitely happening, a great right now answer to that question, because you can totally tell software was a great place to apply LLMs versus competing with the larger models. And also software is one of the most natural things, to get to AGI and apply LLM. So I feel also like with GitHub Copilot, there was also a natural market. But the interesting thing is everybody thinks, oh, just because, Copilot is with Microsoft, that's like a closed market, but it wasn't. A lot of customers were open-minded to switching. So we knew that there was an opportunity for another greater and better company to come in and do an amazing job. But I have to give a lot of credit to Jason and ISO. They were true outlier founders, and the way they talk about the story and the way they kind of like, so 25 chess moves ahead, all I had to do was say yes quickly.
But say yes on the spot. That's not
say
easy.
Yes on the spot.
Diving into that, whether it's risk or differentiation, there's obviously competition. You guys are known for your proprietary models. There's the OpenAIs of the world. There's the Cursors of the world. How do you think about what sets you apart? How do you think about the competition here?
Well, I kind of break the world down into what matters in the moment and then what matters ultimately. And you have to take both of them into consideration. But you can't over-rotate to what matters in the moment. You have to earn the right to do that well, to earn the right to go do what matters ultimately. But you have to keep the eye on the long term. And so the way that we think about the world at the moment is effectively the world has fallen down on this idea that AGI is coming. We all, AGI is a bad term. Let's just be really honest with ourselves. But the idea that human equivalent intelligence is coming in neural networks. There's a set of companies that are going after that, and it's a very small, discrete set of companies. So what I think about when I think about the current competition, I think about the people who are in the AGI race, and that's it. And then when I think about what matters in the long term, as I think about what matters is getting to that amount, pulling together the capital or pulling together the data centers and the GPUs to do that. And ultimately, my market, the people I care about, the people I develop for, are people who put their hands on the keyboards every day and develop software, and how you can give them superpowers. And then you can transform the world from whatever number you say is in the market today for developers, whether it's 30 million or 100 million. But there's 8 billion people on the planet that are not served today by software in terms of creation. And those people at some point in the future are going to get that superpower. So I think about who are currently developers and what their lives are going to look like in 5 years. And I think about who wants to be a developer and what their lives are going to look like in 5 years.
Yeah, it's really, you're going from that 1% number to something meaningfully larger. Speaking of competition, there's also a war for talent. How do you guys win on that front? Where are you guys finding good talent to recruit?
So one of the things that we did really early on, which is maybe largely counterintuitive, is ISO and I are both incredibly geeky in this way, is we inventoried the world's talent for what we need. And what we're building is not just an LLM, it's a system. And so we needed applied researchers and we needed distributed systems engineers. And that's what largely the world understands that these things are these days. And so what we did is we inventoried the world and we came up with about 3,600 names total worldwide that were applicable to what we needed and were of the caliber that we wanted. And one thing that we knew is that we thought we were going to start the company in California, we thought we were going to be in San Francisco in the Bay Area. And then we said, well, okay, if that's the case, then we're going to have to compete with OpenAI and Anthropic for talent right away. Like right in the backyard, you're going to have to do that. But one thing we noticed was that about 45% of every name on that spreadsheet was in Europe, between London, Paris, Zurich, Amsterdam, Madrid. So we did something that, we called it zigging when others are zagging, is we went over there right away and we started to try to scoop up every talented person in Europe we could get. We didn't need 1,000 people. We needed 25 to start. That was going to be the snowball to get us to 75, and et cetera. And we've done a great job on the continent. And we feel that was one of the more prescient decisions that we made very early on. It allowed us to catapult us to where we are. And we feel really lucky too, because of the talent that's there is, it's not lacking for ambition, it's lacking for opportunity. So if you can give them the same sort of outlier goal of an OpenAI or Anthropic, there's a lot of people who want to go do that. They don't want to be in the third office for OpenAI, and they definitely don't want to be in DeepMind anymore.
I think you and I were talking backstage a little bit about hiring not just on software engineering side, but also business side, and you had some interesting anecdotes to share.
Yeah, I think one thing that I wanted to call out is, look, everybody thinks in venture like history is written after people make the great bets, and like it was a straight shot. We made this, you realize it's an amazing company. I think one thing that I will give a lot of credit to Jason and ISO, we basically sign on the mega market, the dream, and the potential for them to execute. Just to be crystal clear, we hope that they were going to follow through on that promise. And I think what was really impressive to me is that the world today is so different. Like when I left Google and we made our first investment in like Shopify, it was like 6 to 8 years to get to 100 million of revenue, and like Google age, like late 90s, maybe it was 8 to 10 years, then it was 5 years. And now you have a record number of companies going from 0 to 100 million in 2 years. And by the way, they're doing that with half the people. And I would actually we don't have revenue numbers, but what was really impressive about Poolside is we realized that in order to realize this dream, the company was going to have a very abnormal spurt to high revenue potential. And so they recently announced that, AWS reInvent a partnership with Amazon. And now what works is you can't just hire salespeople and go from 0 to 100 million in 2 years. You need two things. Number one, sometimes both, a great distribution or channel partner like the announcement at reInvent, but also the product has to be so good that a lot of people need to be interested in it. So you don't need too many salespeople and too many dollars to push that product to get to that, desired incredible revenue spurt. And so I would say, even compared to my experience at Google, I've never seen a team execute the hiring of 25 people, this partnership, which we literally only talked maybe 4 to 6 months before that, maybe we should do something like that, to when they came in oh, we just already did that. It was just amazing. And again, hopefully all VCs are lucky to have a founder group like that.
Could you share a bit more about the partnership? What's the impact it's had since then, and especially into the kind of customer base that you guys are serving?
I mean, I think the way that I'm going to summarize it, I feel pretty lucky to be in the position I am with this partnership with Amazon. To summarize it for the folks that didn't know, is we have a first party relationship with Amazon, meaning that poolside is sold under Amazon paper inside Amazon Marketplace. It looks like an EC2 service or an S3 or any other AWS service. So their sellers are quota retire by selling us. That means their customers commit to retire by buying us. So it's a massive accelerant. And the only other entity in the market that has anything like this is Anthropic. And I think people might already know some of the numbers that Anthropic has done from their first relationship with Amazon. And so we're the second relationship and the only other party that they're doing this with. And the last time the market saw something like this outside of Anthropic and us is Databricks back with Microsoft back in the day. So I feel very lucky to have this, but I also realize how much effing work it was to get it done. So I'm also realizing too that this is just yet another step that you have to go do along this way. And one of the things I appreciated most about Aydin, my first interaction with him, was the first 2 rounds that we did were kind of an IQ test for VCs. It wasn't about us. It was about IQ test for VCs. And it was, do you understand the market? Do you understand what's happening in this moment? And are you going to ask me to round down my ambitions because it's too scary for you, the VC? And Aydin was like, don't round down, go for the effing prize. This is the only thing that matters. And so when you're in that moment and you realize, and you start to realize that you have to go do the uncomfortably hard thing. And the uncomfortably hard thing that we had to knock down in the first 2 years was get a relationship with someone like Amazon, because Microsoft is on the other side of the table. And what am I going to do? I built GitHub Copilot, but I can't go outsell Microsoft, but I know somebody who can. So how do I structure something with Amazon in a way that makes it so it's a win-win for both of us? Well, you have to be in the right room at the right time with some luck and a whole bunch of gumption, and then you get it done. But that's just one of the next 25 things that we have to do before that we're our own $1 trillion company.
Can you share a little bit more about your client base? Kind of how do you win, in front of them versus all this competition?
Sure. So what we're building is, as you mentioned, our own proprietary models. So think of us as OpenAI and Anthropic. Our orientation is towards software for the software domain. We're a full stack, so we are very different than some of the players in the market at the moment, meaning that we have the foundation models and the middleware and our own applications built on top of it. So VS Code, Eclipse, IntelliJ, a CLI, a web app as well. Our primary go-to-market at the moment is we install, we'll call it on-prem, or inside an enterprise's installation. So inside their Amazon VPC, Bedrock, inside their data center, or inside their air-gapped environment. So we're trying to give customers 2 promises at once. We're trying to give them their cake and let them eat it too. And what I mean by that is give them state-of-the-art AI that they can trust, and they do not have to make the trade of sending their data over to somebody else. So in fact, the very first thing I say to an enterprise when I walk in is, I don't want you to trust me, and I'm just going to give you my tools inside your environment, and you don't have to trust me. So our primary audience at the moment is 5,000 developer and above organizations. The quickest uptake has been in the government, defense, FSIs, highly regulated environments. I call these folks, this is a non-traditional software path, non-traditional startup path. But the reason why I like them is, one, they're typically underserved. It's easier to go sell to the YC companies of the Valley than it is to go sell to the government. It's just much longer sales cycles, but a lot more durable sales when you have that as well. And the other is, let's be honest again, and going back to my thing about the hard things, I call these NP hard environments. If I can solve the government's infrastructure problems, if I can solve the various banks of the world's infrastructure problems, I can solve everybody's problems. So I'm going to go do those because not many people want to go do those. And once I do them and I have them as reference customers, nobody in the world can say that they can't use me.
I mean, maybe finishing up on the distribution point, obviously someone like Amazon AWS, widely adopted, very trusted. You just mentioned governments as a customer type, or large financial institutions, etc. They oftentimes deal with big system integrators, big consultants, etc. Like, do you guys have to work through those? Like, how do you speed that up and get in there faster?
Well, similar to our relationship with Amazon, we have another relationship with McKinsey, and we're developing other relationships similar to both of those with other folks. And the primary mechanism by which you're doing that is just aligned incentives. So if you think about why Amazon might want to have a relationship with us, it's because Amazon's one of the best in the world at infrastructure, but they did not have an answer to GitHub Copilot, as an example. but think about systems integrators or think about consultancies of the world. The entire world is shifting to artificial intelligence. And primarily in the clearest, most demonstrable use case for artificial intelligence is software. And so all of them have recognized what's happening in the moment in the market, and they need an answer and they need a recommendation. And if you think about it from another side is, what are they doing? Yes, that's one thing, but what are they recommending? And most of these organizations have to go in and they have to say, I understand what's happening, and here are my thoughts and recommendations on that. And they can't not have an answer. And so they have to clearly look for the best in the industry. And so I feel fortunate that the market has put me in a position where I can just go in and say, this is what we have. And it's a clear answer for many people in those positions.
It's great to hear. Maybe we can shift and talk a little bit about the actual impact now you're having with your clients, with the developers on a day-to-day basis. Like, how are their day-to-day changing?
So the world that we live in at the moment is one that I call a developer-led AI-assisted world. And the moment that we released GitHub Copilot in beta in 21, we basically entered that world. The moment before that, almost every line of code on the planet was human endeavored. But at this point, it's a large number of lines of code are written by AIs. But it's still primarily dev-led AI-assisted. We'll soon enter an AI-led dev-assisted world, and we'll continue to have step functions up. But in the moment, what we are, all AIs in the world are essentially augmenting the current developer set. And if you want to break the world into two different ends of the spectrum, senior developers at one end and then junior developers at another, and obviously there's going to be spectrums in between, but let's take them at extremes. How I see people using these things and how they're impacting them are different. And this is the kind of the beauty of artificial intelligence, is you can do multiple things at once. But for the junior developer, or maybe someone new to an organization or someone moving teams, it allows them, let's call them the infinite set of dumb questions that they don't have to ask the senior person sitting next to them. They can go in and say, tell me about this code base. Explain this project to me. I need to decipher why they would have made this decision on this module here. Walk me through the positive and negative impact of what's happening here. Talk to me about some of the edge cases. These things are excellent at doing that. And so it allows someone to come up to speed, either in a new organization, new team, or new code base incredibly quickly. And they don't have to go ask the senior people all these embarrassing questions. But the senior people, it's kind of interesting. It does two things at once. One is it allows them to focus on the problem they want to focus on, because a lot of the drudgery or ceremony of software can kind of go away and be done by these AIs now. There's a statistic I used when I was at GitHub that 50% of a developer's hands-on keyboard time was YAML files or config files, generally speaking, which is insane. Now, a lot of that stuff goes away now. They can get back to writing the business logic. So that's one. They can focus again on the problem, the actual value creation problem. But the more interesting thing, and this is where we're starting to transition to, is it kind of gives them an infinite set of junior developers. And it allows them to go back into using their taste, discernment, and judgment and experience in a way that says, I can send off 15 different threads. They can all come back, and I can use my time now wisely to say, hey, that was great. While I was sleeping, you just did this massive PR and this thing, and I'm going to review it, and I'm going to tweak just this one section because I didn't like it. The time speed up on that is insurmountable. It's unreal. Now, it's hard to quantify this at the moment, and this is where the industry is actually going back and forth and saying, well, how valuable is this, and what? But no one who's using it is saying it's not valuable. What they are saying is, how do I understand the impact it's having? And obviously the downstream effect is, how do I know what impact that's having from my capitalization structure?
Yeah, actually on that, Vinod earlier made the comment about AI agents being at sort of coding intern levels or junior engineer levels. Aydin, you see so many startups pitch every day. How is that impacting, the amount of capital or talent they even need to hire to start to scale and grow? Like, how does that change your own investment?
So let me tie maybe this thread together to earlier bets we made. I feel like, first of all, I think in order to succeed in venture, you need to be an optimist. And interestingly, this industry is full of skeptics. And maybe I'll be on the other side of Vinod. So if you look at all the bets we made, whether it was Shopify, took commerce tools, made it a lot less simpler, way underpriced it, and the market expanded a lot. This is why in venture we always talk about TIM analysis, and I think it's total crap. You're either wrong by a upside margin or downside margin. But what is most important is what can an incredible founding team and product can do, where it democratizes and the market gets a lot bigger. So I think while everybody's thinking and worrying that, oh my God, AI is going to eat all the engineers, what they're not realizing is what is the percentage of people that can be technical founders today? Right? Like maybe that's 0.1% of the world, 1% of the world. What happens if 10%? Like I wanted to do technical stuff. I wrote basic programs. I could never be as good as Jason and ISO. So I went into the finance side, but there were so many people, the same way Shopify democratized commerce, Canva democratized design. It's not that there wasn't a solution, right? Like you could go to Adobe, you could go to Microsoft Office, with all due respect, they're good products, but super complex, very expensive, it limited access. And all of a sudden with Canva, now like 1 billion people in the world one day will do design that they never would have been able to before. And this is the vision that when I first talked to Jason and ISO, maybe it was the IQ test or maybe it was the dream or vision, but they're like, this is not just about making the world, like it's not a zero-sum game. Like AGI is not gonna win where people need to lose. It's just that all of a sudden we're gonna do other things and it's gonna actually expand the market in a way that we are not expecting yet. And so it's a perfect thread for us because whether it's Shopify, Canva, or Poolside, we're always betting on the optimistic side of things, that the markets are going to be bigger, that actually humanity is going to expand and end up in a better place. Maybe we don't know all the details just yet, but that's where I am versus, say, like Vino.
I think Toby just recently put on Twitter somewhere, which was, why did so many VCs miss Shopify back in the day? And they would say, if I'm paraphrasing him here, but I think it was, well, the market is not that big. And what his statement was because the answer was Shopify. And I think in this way here, there's so many people that want to start companies,
yes,
that want to solve problems in the world, that want to go do things. But the entire world runs on software right now. The entire world. How many chemists, physicists, biologists are trying to solve a set of problems where they need to interact with a team of software engineers? How many people want to go do X, but they need to interact with a technical founder or a team of technical founders? And this is exactly what's going to be available to people in no short order in time. But to Aydin's point, this is, the answer is here, artificial intelligence entirely. And it's going to expand the market in ways that we just cannot understand just yet.
Yeah. Can't even, yeah. Actually, funny enough, I was, my very first job, I learned how to code in SQL and did a bunch of work. And just the other day, we were thinking about coming up with a new voting tool for our partners meetings. And for the first time, it's like, oh, I can build that. I don't need to go ask someone or hire an engineer to go build that.
A good example of this, and we're almost out of time, but not to belabor this point, but I have a certain set of programming languages and systems that I know well. But my daughter is super into Roblox and Minecraft, and I don't know them. And obviously I can learn programming languages, but now I don't necessarily have to be that expert, but I can use my expertise and apply it to a different domain. And it's just like this massive unlock. And all of a sudden that's going to be available to people in various different ways. I don't know. I'm like one of these ultimately optimistic people, but whenever someone says like, a fixed pie type of approach to life in the world, it always confounds me, because never in our history have we ever looked at fixed pies like that. Maybe the only time in history that I can actually understand it is there's 100% of a company and you got to only have X much ownership. That's the last time I can really think about it. The rest of the world is a non-zero sum game.
I know we got 30 seconds. We like predictions. I think Vinod earlier said something about 2040 being the turning point. Like, when would you say we'll know sort of software has actually hit AGI? And I'd love to hear your take as well.
I mean, maybe I'll take a hit on it, because one other thing that is often discussed is like, hey, is it going to completely disrupt VC? And I feel like people don't understand VC is not just capital allocation, but time allocation, and more importantly, like an intelligence and network business. And network means that you have to trust people, you have to coach people. I don't think those things are going to get replaced by AI. So maybe my prediction is AI might make our job easier, that we can deal with complexity and chaos better, but it is not going to replace VCs.
Yeah.
I think the question you're asking in a different way is, when do we hit AGI too?
Yeah.
So two things I'll say is, one, I don't know. But I would say knowledge work as we know it is going to change dramatically within 36 months. I'll say that, I'll make that statement. I'll also say that the path to AGI runs through software for all the technical reasons why we founded Poolside. And the third is, anyone who says they actually have that answer is a little bit BSing, because it's kind of like the same thing as saying, when does red become blue?
Yeah.
In 2040, 2050, we'll be able to look back and say definitively on that date, but while we're living in the moment, it's difficult. But the one thing I'll say is I do think knowledge work, anything that happens behind a screen within 36 months, looks drastically different.
I believe in that as well. Well, let's end on that note. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, everybody.